After 10 years as a psychologist, I thought I'd seen it all. I thought I understood the landscape of human pain, the messy chaos of failure, the predictable trajectory of loss, the patterns of grief and betrayal that repeat across cultures and generations. But after talking to 100 men whose lives were shattered by betrayal, whose security was ripped away by a sudden, unthinkable confession, I learned something terrifying. Something that challenges everything we think we know about loyalty, love, and the moment a relationship truly dies. I learned that cheating isn't just an event, it's a slow, quiet migration of the soul, a psychological journey that unfolds in stages so subtle, so imperceptible, that by the time the physical betrayal occurs, it's merely the final administrative act of a process that began months, sometimes even years earlier. These men came to me, broken, clutching the fragmented timeline of their undoing, asking the same desperate, whispered question: when did it truly start? They searched their memories like detectives at a crime scene, looking for the exact moment, the precise conversation, the specific day when everything changed. They replayed arguments, analyzed text messages, dissected their partner's changing habits with obsessive precision. Most believed the moment of betrayal was a late-night text, a drunken mistake at an office party, or a sudden, irresistible physical urge that overwhelmed their partner's better judgment. They were profoundly, tragically wrong. And this realization, this quiet, chilling psychological pattern, I saw repeating with clinical precision in every single story, across different ages, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different relationship lengths, is what I'm going to share with you now. I now know when a woman truly begins to cheat, and it happens long before she ever crosses a physical boundary. The brutal, unseen truth is that the physical act is merely the administrative closure of an emotional process that finished weeks, sometimes months, earlier. The body follows where the mind has already traveled. The affair partner is not the cause of the betrayal, he is the symptom of a psychological transformation that was already complete. The core question most men ask is entirely wrong. They ask, when did she cheat? But the question they should be asking is, when did she detach emotionally? Because the detachment always begins with a phenomenon psychologists call emotional displacement. This is the subtle, deadly shift where the emotional energy, the vulnerability, the seeking of validation that was once directed at the partner is gently, almost imperceptibly, shifted away from him. It is not hostility, it is worse. It is a quiet, cold neutrality, the emotional equivalent of watching someone slowly fade from a photograph. Her intrinsic needs for connection don't vanish. They just stop expecting to be met by you. They find a new, silent target, or sometimes they simply turn inward, creating a fortress of self-sufficiency that excludes you entirely. The well of shared emotion starts to run dry, not with a sudden crack, but with a slow internal seepage that goes unnoticed until the well is completely empty. I remember one man, a brilliant, successful architect named David, who recounted the period just before his world collapsed. He sat in my office, hands trembling around a crumpled tissue, his expensive suit somehow looking rumpled and defeated despite its perfect tailoring. She used to share everything, he told me, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking louder would make the memory more real, more painful. The silly office gossip about her coworker's terrible haircut, the frustration with her mother's passive-aggressive comments about our Christmas plans, the small triumphs of a successful presentation, the fear of aging she felt when she found her first gray hair. Every detail of her internal life was an open book to me. I knew her fears, her dreams, her insecurities, her hopes. I could read her moods before she even spoke. He paused, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. Then, one day, she just stopped. When I asked about her day, it was always fine or busy or nothing much. When I pressed for details, she'd look at me with this strange expression, not anger, not irritation, just indifference. Like I was a stranger on a bus asking intrusive questions. I thought she was stressed with the promotion at work. I thought she was becoming more independent, more mature. I thought I was giving her the space she needed to breathe, to grow into her own person. I didn't realize I was giving her the space to build an entire secret world within the confines of our own home. This withdrawal of internal sharing, this redirection of her most authentic, unguarded self, is the first and most critical step on the psychological timeline of infidelity. Her formal contractual loyalty is still intact. Yes, she still wears the ring. She still says, "I love you," at the end of phone calls, though the words now sound rehearsed, automatic, like reciting a script she's memorized but no longer feels. But her emotional blueprint is already being redrawn. She is practicing self-sufficiency in the emotional realm, training herself to rely on other sources for comfort, attention, and deep conversation. She hasn't chosen the other man yet. In fact, there might not even be another man yet, but she has definitely chosen to leave the emotional marriage. She is no longer emotionally vulnerable to you. She stops reaching for your hand, not in anger, but because the gesture has ceased to feel necessary or meaningful. The muscle memory of intimacy begins to atrophy. The subtle rejection is felt first by her own subconscious, long before you perceive the external coolness. She is already practicing what psychologists call anticipatory grief, mourning the relationship while still physically present in it. This emotional void is immediately followed by the chilling mental gymnastics of cognitive dissonance. A woman deep down knows who she is. She has an internal self-concept, a moral identity she's built over a lifetime. She believes in commitment, in the sacredness of the relationship, in her own moral compass. This is especially true for women who come from traditional families, who witnessed their parents' long marriages, who've always defined themselves as loyal, trustworthy, ethical people. To engage in or even contemplate betrayal is to contradict her fundamental self-concept. The human mind hates this contradiction. It is a source of immense psychological distress that can manifest as anxiety, insomnia, irritability, and even physical symptoms like headaches or digestive problems. The mind is screaming, "This isn't who you are. This violates everything you believe about yourself." So to alleviate the mental pain, the mind doesn't change the behavior, it changes the narrative. This is a fundamental principle of cognitive dissonance theory. When our actions conflict with our beliefs, we will either change the actions or change the beliefs. And changing beliefs is psychologically easier than changing course once the emotional displacement has begun. She must psychologically render the man she is with unworthy of her loyalty. This is not a conscious, malicious act. It's a protective mechanism of the psyche, trying to preserve her self-image as a good person. She has to find flaws, magnify his mistakes, and selectively remember every moment of perceived neglect, every unkind word, every missed opportunity for connection, every promise that wasn't perfectly kept. This is not honest self-reflection. It is a desperate search for justification. She begins keeping a mental ledger of his failures, scrolling through years of memories with a prosecutor's eye, highlighting everything that can be used as evidence in the internal trial she's conducting. She is not creating a reason to leave. She is creating a reason to be forgiven by her own conscience for the act she is about to commit or is already committing emotionally. The man becomes a villain in her rewritten history, a flawed, insensitive figure whose failures forced her hand. The internal monologue becomes a relentless loop that plays on repeat during her commute, in the shower, while lying awake at 3 a.m. If he were a better listener, if he paid more attention to the things I care about, if he still saw me the way he did when we first met, if he valued my career as much as his own, if he helped more with the house, if he appreciated my efforts, then I wouldn't feel this way. This is his fault. I'm the victim here. The stories from the 100 men were eerily uniform in describing this phase, with a precision that was both fascinating and heartbreaking from a clinical perspective. It's the period where arguments stop making sense. The complaints aren't about tangible issues like finances, household responsibilities, or parenting disagreements. They're about a vague existential sense of emptiness she now attributes entirely to the partner. One man, Marcus, a former military officer accustomed to logic, clear objectives, and problem-solving, sat across from me with the bewildered expression of someone whose entire worldview had been shattered. He said, and this line haunts me to this day, She started arguing with me about things I didn't do. Not things I did wrong, things I didn't do at all. She would accuse me of not being the man she thought I was when we met, of changing into someone unrecognizable, of losing the qualities that made her fall in love with me. But when I asked her specifically what had changed, what behaviors were different, she couldn't articulate it. She just kept saying, "You're different. We're different. This isn't what I signed up for." It felt like she was deliberately trying to pick a fight to justify something I couldn't see, a looming decision that needed my failure as its fuel. This is the mind deep in dissonance, performing the subtle mirror effect, projecting her own impending guilt and dissatisfaction onto the man she is about to betray. The guilt she feels about her emotional withdrawal, about the thoughts she's having about other possibilities, about the attention she's enjoying from someone else, all of that guilt gets transformed into blame directed at him. The guilt becomes blame, and the blame, a heavy, suffocating atmosphere, becomes the emotional permission slip she needs. She pushes you away, not because she wants you gone immediately. In fact, she often still wants the security, the familiarity, the life you've built together. But because she needs you to look flawed enough to make her subsequent actions feel like an act of survival, not treachery. She is testing the tensile strength of your patience, hoping you'll react poorly enough to solidify her manufactured narrative of victimhood. If you lose your temper, if you withdraw, if you become defensive, if you meet her criticism with your own, perfect. She now has concrete evidence for her case against you. The external validation trap. The actual psychological boundary is truly crossed during the stage of attention shifting. In a healthy, functioning relationship, the primary, non-negotiable source of validation, affirmation, and feeling seen comes from the partner. This is the person whose opinion matters most, whose praise carries the most weight, whose attention feels the most meaningful. When emotional displacement occurs, this fundamental need is starved, leading to a profound vulnerability that she might not even consciously recognize. Then, a small, often insignificant source of external attention, a sustained compliment from a colleague about how she handled a difficult client, a flirty text exchange that makes her laugh during a boring meeting, a genuine listening ear from a new acquaintance at a networking event, a moment of deep eye contact in a crowd that makes her feel seen in a way she hasn't felt in months, feels like an emotional transfusion. It's like water in a desert. It's like oxygen in a suffocating room. It's crucial to understand. In the beginning, it's not about the person, it's about the feeling. That small validation, which in any other time would be dismissed as trivial or even uncomfortable, starts feeling like a deep, desperate breath of oxygen. This external attention doesn't just feel good. It feels real and effortless in comparison to the carefully constructed justification of unworthiness she's been building around her primary partner. Think about it. With this new source of attention, she doesn't have to justify her feelings. She doesn't have to explain her needs. She doesn't have to feel like she's nagging or demanding or asking for too much. The attention just flows, easy, natural, exciting, and the contrast is intoxicating. The moment she starts measuring her partner's value against the unearned, effortless validation from an outside source, that is the moment the door to her emotional commitment is officially unlocked. She has found an escape hatch. She begins to think, why is it so easy with him, but so hard with my partner? Why does he understand me immediately when my husband requires endless explanations? Why do I feel alive and interesting and valued with him, but invisible and taken for granted at home? What she doesn't realize, what the cognitive dissonance prevents her from seeing, is that she's comparing apples to oranges. She's comparing the effortless excitement of a new connection, unburdened by mortgages, children, aging parents, career pressures, and daily logistics, to a long-term relationship carrying the full weight of shared adult life. She's comparing the highlight reel to the behind-the-scenes footage. She's comparing fantasy to reality. But the human brain, especially one in emotional pain, is remarkably good at accepting convenient illusions. This new attention becomes proof that she deserves better, that better exists, that she's been settling, that she's been diminished by her primary relationship. The affair partner becomes a mirror reflecting back the version of herself she wishes she still was, or thinks she could be again. The silence before the storm. And then comes the most deceptive, most dangerous sign of all: the silence before the storm. Most men believe a relationship is in trouble when there is conflict, yelling, slammed doors, or emotional fireworks. They mistake the noise for the problem. They think, if we're fighting, it means she still cares enough to fight. If she's angry, at least she's engaged. The truth in this context is the opposite. The real catastrophic danger is when the woman stops trying, when cold withdrawal replaces genuine, heartfelt arguments, when she stops fighting for your attention, stops complaining about the things that genuinely bother her, and stops attempting to engage you in fixing the core issues. She has moved from being an active participant in the relationship's survival to being a passive observer of its demise. One of the men, Robert, a powerful CEO accustomed to control, reading people and predicting market trends, sat in my office with his voice cracking with the memory of his own blindness. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, looking at the floor as he spoke. She was criticizing me every day for years. My working hours, my lack of emotional availability, my obsession with building the company, my absence at family dinners. Every day, a new complaint. Every week, a new argument about balance and priorities. And then, 6 months before the discovery, she just went quiet. He looked up at me, and I saw genuine confusion in his eyes. I didn't even notice she stopped arguing about the future, about the kids' college plans, about my working hours. I thought we'd finally found peace. I thought she'd accepted who I was, that we'd reached a new level of understanding and maturity. I actually congratulated myself on weathering the storm. I didn't realize that peace was her way of leaving. She wasn't accepting me. She was already gone. The silence wasn't resolution. It was resignation. When she goes quiet, she has stopped engaging you as her partner in the problem. She has made an internal, silent decision to navigate the problem alone, which means navigating out of the relationship. The silence is not resolution, it is resignation. It's the emotional equivalent of a doctor stepping back from a terminal patient, still providing care, but no longer fighting for survival. She is no longer invested in changing you or changing the relationship. She is investing her energy into making the inevitable outcome smooth, quiet, and justifiable for herself. She begins to distance herself, not with anger, but with an eerie, calm politeness. She becomes agreeable about things that used to bother her. She stops asking you to come to bed earlier. She stops suggesting date nights. She stops initiating difficult conversations about the relationship. She starts making independent decisions without consulting you. Not big ones that would raise alarm, but small ones that signal autonomy. Changing her hair drastically, signing up for classes you've never heard her mention, making weekend plans with friends she doesn't invite you to join. By the time a woman cheats, she has already mourned the relationship privately and is simply waiting for the right calculated moment to execute the pre-written script, to deliver the final inevitable line. She's already had the breakup conversation with herself 100 times. She's already imagined the logistics of separation. She's already Googled divorce lawyers or apartment listings. The physical betrayal, when it comes, is merely the external manifestation of an internal process that's already complete. The paradox of improvement. This entire psychological journey is why most men, the 100 men I spoke to, missed the early, deadly signs, because the signs often look like improvement. She's less nagging, less demanding, less overtly emotional, less volatile. She seems calmer, more independent, less reliant on him for her happiness. Her mood isn't tied to his actions anymore. She doesn't get upset when he works late. She doesn't complain when he forgets important dates. She's not checking his phone or asking where he's been. He sees a mature, less dramatic partner. She sees a life already mentally uncoupled. Most men think cheating begins with a kiss, a shared moment of drunken weakness, or a gradual escalation of inappropriate flirting. It doesn't. It begins with a quiet decision, a cognitive shift, made weeks before you ever notice her behavior has changed outwardly. Her entire emotional landscape has already rearranged itself to accommodate the betrayal, treating the relationship as a vestigial organ, present but no longer necessary for survival. The relationship becomes like a job she's already quit, but is still showing up to for the paycheck until she finds something better. She's mentally moved out while still sleeping in the same bed. The gender difference in infidelity. The deeper analysis of female infidelity reveals a distinct rationalization pattern that differs significantly from male infidelity. While male infidelity is often compartmentalized, the physical acts separate from the emotional bond, a moment of opportunity or physical temptation that can exist independently of the relationship's quality. Female infidelity is almost always driven by a profound emotional starvation that leads to a subconscious act of sabotage. Her goal isn't just physical novelty, it's emotional retrieval. She is seeking a feeling of being valued, seen, understood, and deeply connected that she has convinced herself she can no longer get from her primary partner. She seeks the reflection of a worth she feels has been diminished in the primary relationship. This is why female infidelity is often described as more threatening to the primary relationship. It's not just the body that has strayed, it's the heart, the mind, the core emotional investment. For most women, the physical act is almost secondary to the emotional connection. She's not leaving her partner for better sex. She's leaving for someone who makes her feel alive again, someone who asks questions and waits for answers, someone who notices when she gets a haircut, someone who remembers what she said last week, someone who validates her feelings without immediately trying to solve the problem or dismiss her concerns. The paradox of the infidelity itself is profound. The guilt of the betrayal actually fuels a peculiar kind of excitement. The moral transgression provides a shocking, vivid contrast to the dull, justified reality she is trying to escape. The forbidden nature of it makes her feel alive in a way that the predictable safety of her primary relationship no longer does. This allows the human brain to completely rewrite morality in that moment to survive the emotional conflict. She tells herself, I wouldn't have done this if I wasn't so desperately unhappy. I wouldn't be capable of this if he had been meeting my needs. I'm not a bad person. I'm a hurt person making the only choice available to me. The unhappiness, therefore, becomes the external, uncontrollable, justifiable cause, not her own intentional, selfish choice. It is a survival mechanism of the fractured psyche. She convinces herself she is the victim of the relationship's failures, rather than an agent of its destruction. So, what is the ultimate chilling realization? What is the precise psychological moment that cheating truly begins? After 100 stories of ruined lives, of men picking through the ashes of their past like archaeologists at a disaster site, I realized cheating doesn't start with another man, another text message, or another late night. It starts the day she stops seeing you through the eyes of admiration and respect and starts seeing herself independently as someone who deserves more than you are currently providing, or more accurately, more than she has convinced herself you are capable of providing. The moment she mentally elevates her perceived right to self-defined happiness above her contractual, freely given commitment to the relationship, the psychological foundation collapses. That is the true genesis of the betrayal. It's the moment when her internal calculation shifts from, how do we fix this, to how do I get what I need elsewhere? This is often triggered by a specific moment of clarity, not always dramatic, sometimes devastatingly mundane. One woman described it to her husband as the moment he walked past her crying in the kitchen without stopping to ask what was wrong. Another said it was when he chose to attend a work event instead of her father's funeral. Another said it was when he laughed at her business idea she'd been nervous to share. Another said it was when he forgot her birthday for the third year in a row. Another said it was when she realized he hadn't asked her a meaningful question about her life in 6 months. These moments become symbolic of everything she feels is wrong. They become proof of her narrative. They become the concrete evidence that justifies the abstract feeling of being unappreciated, undervalued, unseen. If you are a man watching this, here are the specific clinical warning signs that the psychological timeline has already begun. Stage 1, emotional withdrawal. She stops sharing the small details of her day. Her answers become monosyllabic: fine, good, nothing. She no longer seeks your opinion on decisions, big or small. She stops including you in her internal emotional world. She handles crises or problems without mentioning them to you. She no longer complains about the things that used to bother her. Her eyes have a distant quality when you're talking stage 2, narrative reconstruction. Arguments become about abstract concepts rather than specific issues. She references how you've changed without providing concrete examples. She brings up failures from years ago as if they happened yesterday. She compares you unfavorably to other men: her father, her friend's husband, a celebrity. She uses absolute language: you never, you always. She seems to be building a case against you rather than working on solutions. She dismisses your attempts to change as too little, too late. Stage 3, external validation seeking. She suddenly cares more about her appearance. She's on her phone more, especially protective of it. She mentions a new friend or coworker frequently with admiration. She has inside jokes or references you don't understand. She's suddenly unavailable at times. She used to be accessible. She has a new hobby or interest she doesn't invite you into. She seems happier after work than she is at home. Stage 4, the silence. She stops initiating difficult conversations. She becomes agreeable about things that used to matter to her. She makes independent plans without discussing them with you. She no longer fights when you disagree. She seems emotionally neutral rather than engaged. She responds to "I love you" with "you too" instead of "I love you too." Physical intimacy becomes mechanical or disappears entirely. Don't chase her silence. Don't try to fix her distance by smothering her with desperate attention, by buying gifts, by planning elaborate gestures, by suddenly trying to become the person you think she wants. Study it. Listen to the quiet. Observe the patterns. Because that silence and that distance are not problems to be solved with more effort. They are the two dark valleys where the truth hides. They are the clear, final echoes of an internal executive decision that has already been made, long before she ever had to say the devastating words out loud. By the time you're begging her to tell you what's wrong, promising to change, pleading for another chance, it's often too late. The psychological transformation is complete. She's not listening to your promises because she's already heard them before, or because she no longer believes you're capable of becoming what she needs, or most devastatingly, because she no longer cares enough to see if you'll try. Understanding this timeline is not about blame, it's about recognition. Some relationships reach this point because of genuine incompatibility, because both partners grew into different people, because life circumstances created unbridgeable gaps. Some reach it because of neglect, complacency, or the slow erosion of effort and appreciation. Some reach it because she has unrealistic expectations, because she's chasing a fantasy, because she's unwilling to do the hard work of long-term commitment. But regardless of the cause, the pattern remains the same. And if you can recognize it early, in stage 1 or stage 2, there's still hope. That's when couples therapy can work. That's when radical honesty can create a breakthrough. That's when consistent, sustained effort to reconnect can rebuild the emotional bridge. But by stage 4, by the silence, you're no longer trying to save a relationship. You're trying to resurrect one that already died. And resurrection requires both parties to be willing participants. If she's already mentally filed for divorce, already found emotional refuge elsewhere, already rewritten your shared history into a tragedy where you're the villain, your chances of recovery are microscopic. The cruelest truth is that the signs of imminent betrayal often look, to the untrained eye, like peace, like maturity, like growth, like her finally becoming less needy, less emotional, less exhausting to be with. When in reality, it's the opposite. It's her becoming less invested, less connected, less present, less yours.